I have a question for Christy and Lisa, actually, since we're talking about this. What is your experience in, that idea of kind of what Brandy was just talking about in terms of, you miss things because it's in the wrong place, or it might have been in your calendar and it's now past that date and you don't think to look back in terms, often when we look at calendars, we kind of have trained ourselves to look forward. So maybe we look at the week, but we hardly ever look back in time. And I think that's where we get ourselves into trouble when we're putting tasks and calendar appointments and that kind of thing together. So I don't know if you guys have any
Mhm.
thoughts, but
Well, I sometimes make the mistake of putting a task in a calendar and then not accomplishing it and then looking for it, looking ahead. And there is a search feature on my calendar because I'm using the feature on my phone. So I will search for something and think, well, when did I do that? And then realize I didn't do it, but it's back on the calendar a couple of weeks. So, yeah.
that's great. So that's a wonderful strategy, Lisa. So if you know that you put in there, but you don't know where it is, right? Instead of trying to go through your history and see when it might have been there, just using that search feature, as long as you
Right.
know the word or a word that was part of what it was that you were doing, that's a great strategy for people. Yeah, very good.
The problem that I have with I've never put in a task within the calendar because I can't check it off. For those of you who like that check off thing, um, not being able to see, I'm a visual person. It's not that I need to see the check off, but I get happy at that. I don't need that reinforcement, but I do need to be able to see what I've done and what I haven't done. I'm extremely visual. And so for me to be able in a calendar, there's nowhere to check that off. I mean, if you were to swipe it in this case to delete it on your phone, okay, I've done it. You can't go back and see where you did it, when you did it, if you did it. And then I think you'd be tempted or thought self-doubt that, question yourself, did I do it? Did I do? And not being able to know if you did or when you did is going to be a problem. So I know that that's something that you also, when you have your to-dos in our tool on the best suite, you'll be able to search and see when you did do it. If, not only at the time that you did it that day, but you can go back and search and see if and when you did do it. Or if you didn't do it, you can search it and see, oh yeah, it didn't get done. So that's really helpful. I just wanted to throw that in.
Yeah,
Christy, it makes me think of something a professor said to me in graduate school. If you don't write it down, it didn't get done.
Mm-hmm.
And being sure that we can go back. And I do constantly in my job. Did I get that project done? Let me go back and check. Because if I don't write it down, I don't necessarily recall that it was completed.
Yeah.
And sometimes it wasn't, and I have to complete it.
Right. Well, that's another thing I think that is interesting about the difference between paper and electronics, because I've had it over the years of teaching. I've had students that will take notes in a notebook, a physical notebook, or they'll have their task list on a sheet of paper, all of which is fine. What's interesting though is once that notebook gets filled up, it usually goes on a shelf at the house or something. And so you really can't go back and look back in time to see whether or not you did it. And it may not really matter a whole lot if it was fairly recent, but if it's at the end of the notebook and you've now just switched to a new notebook, that history for a lot of people with brain injuries and memory impairments, that history's gone unless you can, see it when you need it. And so I think that becomes a really important kind of thing to think about as you're making a decision. Should I stay with paper or should I try to move to the technology? And I don't mean to indicate that a person has to move to technology or, should stay with paper. It's going to be an individual choice, but it's interesting the different considerations that we have to take. and think about as we begin to make those decisions, which are going to be very impactful for people with brain injuries.
You're absolutely right. I'm thinking about a situation in my personal life. I have a child who became an Eagle Scout. And because I keep everything paper, I have an entire file box of calendars, my work calendars, my home calendars. So when he had to go back and recreate when he completed things, we had to pull that file box out and literally go through every single calendar for 5 years to recreate the timeline of all of the activities he participated, all of his service hours, because it was all written. But if we'd been able to just search for anything related to Eagle Scout or to Boy Scout, it could have populated and we wouldn't have had to spend days going through paper calendars.
Yeah.